The Grand Chamber of the Galactic Council was the largest meeting hall in the known universe. It was carved from the heart of a crystal moon and could hold representatives from 1,000 different worlds. Today it held delegates from 47 spacefaring civilizations. Every single one of them was angry at the same species. Humanity, High Arbiter Zetheron stood at the central podium. He was a Velthari, which meant he was 8 feet tall, with shimmering blue scales and 4 arms, that he used for dramatic gestures during important speeches. His species had ruled this council for 6,000 years, and in all that time, he had never seen such unanimous agreement among so many different aliens. They all wanted war. The chamber was filled with noise. The Krixali delegates clicked their mandibles in fury. They looked like giant spiders made of black glass, and their 8 eyes reflected the chamber lights like pools of oil. The Methadari swirled in their containment fields, their gaseous bodies changing colors to show their anger. The Torvani stomped their hooved feet against the crystal floor. The Zelphids hummed with frequencies that made nearby delegates uncomfortable. Zetheron struck the ancient gong 3 times, and silence fell across the chamber like a heavy blanket. Yes! The council has deliberated for 17 cycles, he announced. His voice was deep and carried easily through the translation systems that turned his words into something every species could understand. We have examined the evidence. We have heard the testimonies. We have reviewed the data. He paused for effect. Knowing that every eye and sensor in the chamber was focused on him, species known as humanity has violated the sacred accords of non-interference on 32 documented occasions. They have expanded beyond their designated sector without permission. They have made contact with primitive species and shared technology with them. They have developed weapons that threaten the stability of 3 entire quadrants of the galaxy. Murmurs of agreement rippled through the chamber. The Krixal ambassador, a particularly large specimen named Krixveth, rose on its 8 legs and chittered its approval. The sound was translated as enthusiastic support for whatever punishment the council decided to impose. Furthermore, Zetheron continued, humanity has refused to comply with council directives. They have ignored our warnings. They have rejected our authority. They have behaved as if the laws that govern all civilized species do not apply to them. He raised all 4 of his arms in the traditional gesture of judgment. Therefore, the Galactic Council formally declares a state of war against the Terran Confederacy. Their worlds will be blockaded. Their fleets will be destroyed. Their colonies will be occupied. Their species will be confined to their original homeworld until such time as they demonstrate proper respect for galactic law and civilizational maturity. The chamber erupted in cheering, roaring, clicking, humming, and a dozen other sounds of approval. 47 species, many of whom had fought each other for millennia, were united for the first time in their shared hatred of these upstart humans. But one seat in the chamber remained calm. The human delegation consisted of a single person. He was a middle-aged man with graying hair at his temples and a face that looked like it had seen many long meetings. He wore a simple gray suit that was neither impressive nor memorable. He sat with his legs crossed and his hands folded in his lap, and throughout the entire proceeding, he had not moved or spoken or shown any reaction at all. His name was Henry Bishop, and he looked like the most bored person in the entire galaxy. Zetheron turned his attention to the human with barely concealed satisfaction. This was the moment he had been waiting for. He wanted to see fear in those strange round eyes. He wanted to watch the human realize the magnitude of what was about to happen to his species. The human representative will now be given the opportunity to respond, Zetheron announced. Though I doubt any words can change what has already been decided. Henry Bishop did not stand up. He did not make a dramatic speech. Instead, he reached slowly into the briefcase beside his chair. Every weapon in the chamber immediately pointed at him. Guards surged forward from their positions along the walls. The Krixal ambassador produced venomous barbs from its thorax. The Torvani delegate pulled out a plasma pistol. Even the gaseous Methadari compressed itself into a denser, more threatening form. Henry ignored all of them. He pulled out a newspaper. It was an actual paper newspaper. The kind that had been nearly extinct on Earth for 3 centuries before experiencing a nostalgic revival. It had black ink on thin gray paper, and it crinkled slightly as Henry unfolded it. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a pair of reading glasses. He placed them carefully on his nose and adjusted them till they sat just right. Then he began to read. The chamber fell into confused silence. This was not any reaction they had anticipated. The humans were supposed to beg for mercy. They were supposed to make desperate threats. They were supposed to cry or rage or plead. They were not supposed to read the newspaper. Human Envoy, Zetharin said, his scales shifting to a purple color that indicated confusion. You have been informed that the combined military forces of 47 civilizations have declared war upon your species. This represents the largest military coalition in the history of the galaxy. Over 18,000 warships will be mobilized against you. Your response is to read? Henry turned a page without looking up. Ham. There is a lovely article here about a baking competition in Nebraska. Someone made a pie shaped like the Andromeda Galaxy. Very creative. The crust work alone must have taken hours. Crixveth stepped forward, its 8 legs clicking against the crystal floor. You insult us with this display of disrespect. Do you not comprehend the forces that are arrayed against you? The Crixall swarm alone commands 400 hive ships. Each vessel carries enough bio-warriors to consume an entire continent. We could devour your homeworld in a single feeding cycle. That does sound impressive, Henry agreed. He still did not look up from his newspaper. Oh, look at this. The Cubs might actually make the playoffs this year. My nephew will be absolutely thrilled. He has been waiting his whole life for this. The Methadary delegate pulsed with barely contained rage. Its gaseous form cycled through colors that indicated extreme hostility, and its translated voice emerged as an angry hiss. We have studied your pathetic species. Your Terran Confederacy possesses only 212 vessels capable of faster-than-light travel. Your combined military personnel number less than 4 million individuals. You are outnumbered by a factor of 1,000 to 1. This is not a war. This is an execution. Henry Bishop finally looked up from his newspaper. He removed his reading glasses slowly, tucked them into his breast pocket with careful precision. His expression had not changed. He still looked bored, perhaps even slightly sleepy. Like a man who had sat through too many meetings and was thinking about what he would have for dinner. You have done your homework, he said mildly. That is very thorough of you. I appreciate the effort. But I am curious about something. He stood up from his chair, and despite his unremarkable appearance, something in the room shifted. The guards did not lower their weapons, but they seemed less certain about using them. Did your intelligence teams happen to note what percentage of humanity's economy is devoted to military applications? The Methadary flickered uncertainly. Our analysts estimated approximately 12%, which is high by galactic standards but insufficient to challenge our combined forces. Henry smiled. It was not a reassuring smile. 4%, he said softly. We spend 4% of our gross domestic product on defense, and most of that goes to pensions and health care for our veterans. The chamber was silent. We have been at peace for 300 years, Henry continued. We stopped building warships a very long time ago because we found the whole enterprise rather dull. The vessels you have counted are antiques, museum pieces. We keep them around for parades and historical reenactments and school field trips. He picked up his newspaper and tucked it under his arm. Now, if you will excuse me, I have some reading to finish. But I suggest you think very carefully about what happens next. And with that, Henry Bishop sat back down, opened his newspaper, and resumed reading about the pie shaped like Andromeda. The grand chamber of the Galactic Council had never been so quiet. 3 days passed after the declaration of war, and the Galactic Council was in chaos. The delegates had expected many things from humanity. They had expected panic. They had expected desperate attempts at negotiation. They had expected threats, or bribes, or appeals to mercy. They had prepared responses for all of these possibilities. They had not prepared for a man reading a newspaper. High Arbiter Zetharin had barely slept since that strange moment in the Grand Chamber. His scales had lost their healthy blue shine and turned a dull gray color that indicated stress and confusion. He paced back and forth in his private quarters, his forearms clasped behind his back, trying to understand what had happened. The human envoy had shown no fear. None at all. He had been told that 18,000 warships were about to descend upon his people, and he had responded by reading about a pie shaped like a galaxy. Either the human was insane, or he knew something the Council did not. Zetheron had ordered his intelligence services to dig deeper into humanity's capabilities. The reports that came back were strange and contradictory. Humanity had no significant military. Their defense budget was tiny. Their warships were old and poorly maintained. By every measure the Council used to evaluate threats, humanity should have been terrified. But the humans were not terrified. The humans were going about their normal lives as if nothing had happened. Their news channels were not discussing the war. Their governments had not declared emergencies. Their citizens were more interested in sports and entertainment than in the massive alien fleet that was supposedly about to destroy them. It made no sense. Emergency session convened in a smaller chamber than before. Only the most senior delegates were present, representing the 12 most powerful civilizations in the coalition. They sat around a circular table made of polished black stone, and their expressions ranged from confused to angry to genuinely frightened. Henry Bishop sat in the same gray suit he had worn 3 days ago. He looked well-rested and slightly amused, like a man who had just heard a mildly funny joke. "We have called this session to discuss the situation," Zetheron began. His voice was less confident than it had been during the original declaration. "The Council demands an explanation for your behavior, human envoy." Henry raised an eyebrow. "My behavior?" "I sat quietly through your very long speech and then read my newspaper. I thought I was being rather polite. You showed no concern for the war we declared against your species, should I have. You made a decision based on your understanding of the situation. I saw no reason to become emotional about it." Ambassador Crixveth leaned forward, its 8 eyes fixed on the human with predatory intensity. "You are either brave or foolish. My people have begun mobilizing our hive ships. In 2 weeks, 400 vessels carrying 18 million bio-warriors will be ready to launch. They will consume everything in their path." "That is quite a lot of bio-warriors," Henry agreed pleasantly. "They must eat a tremendous amount of food. The logistics alone must be challenging." The Crixelli ambassador hissed in frustration. "You mock us. I am simply making conversation. You brought up your bio-warriors. I expressed interest in the practical aspects of maintaining such a large force. Is that not what civilized beings do during diplomatic meetings?" The Methodary delegate swirled in its containment field, colors shifting rapidly. "We have been analyzing your response since the declaration. Our psychologists believe you are engaging in a bluffing strategy. You hope that by appearing unconcerned, you will make us doubt our own intelligence about your capabilities." Henry nodded thoughtfully. "That is a reasonable theory. It is wrong, but it is reasonable." "Then explain yourself," Zetheron demanded. "You have told us that humanity spends only 4% of its economy on defense. You have told us that your warships are museum pieces. If this is true, then you have no way to resist our forces. Yet, you sit here as calmly as if we were discussing trade agreements." Henry was quiet for a moment. He seemed to be considering how to respond. "Let me ask you a question," he said finally. "When your species first developed faster-than-light travel, how long did it take?" Zetheron blinked his 4 eyes in surprise at the change of subject. "The Velthri spent approximately 800 years developing our full-drive technology. It was the greatest scientific achievement in our history. And the Crixall?" Crixveth clicked its mandibles. "The Swarm acquired full-drive technology through conquest. We took it from the Velmorians after we consumed their civilization." "Charming." "And the Methodari?" The gaseous being pulsed thoughtfully. "We developed our spatial compression drives over a period of 1,200 years. It required the combined efforts of our greatest scientific minds across 17 generations." Henry nodded. "Humanity developed faster-than-light travel in 43 years. The chamber fell silent. "That is impossible," the Methodari delegate said. "The theoretical foundations alone would require centuries of research. And yet we did it. We went from our first primitive rockets to interstellar travel in less than 500 years total. We went from horses and sailing ships to colonizing other star systems in what your species would consider a single lifetime. Zetharan's scales had turned pale. How? Because we do not wait for certainty before we act. We do not spend centuries perfecting theories. We build things, and when they explode, we build them again differently. We make mistakes faster than any other species in the galaxy, which means we also learn faster. He leaned forward slightly, and his pleasant expression became something sharper. Your intelligence reports told you about our military capabilities. They told you how many ships we have, how many soldiers we employ, how much money we spend on defense. All of that information is accurate, but your reports missed something important. What did they miss? Zetharan asked quietly. They missed what we are capable of when we actually try. Wenry reached into his briefcase, and once again, every guard in the room tensed. But this time he pulled out a small tablet computer instead of a newspaper. He tapped the screen a few times, and then slid it across the table toward Zetharan. This is a summary of humanity's current research projects. Not military research, just regular civilian science. There are approximately 300,000 active research teams working on various problems across our territory. Physics, chemistry, biology, engineering, mathematics, computational theory. Most of them are working on things that have nothing to do with warfare. Zetharan looked at the tablet with growing unease. I do not understand. Why are you showing us this? Because I want you to understand something important. Humanity has not built a significant military because we have not needed one. We have been at peace for 300 years. We have been too busy solving interesting problems to bother with something as boring as war. He paused to let that sink in. But if you force us to redirect our attention toward military applications, you will not be facing the 4% of our economy that currently handles defense. You will be facing the full creative output of 8 billion minds who are very, very good at solving problems. You are threatening us, Crixveth said. No, I am warning you. There is a difference. A threat means I want to hurt you. A warning means I want to prevent a situation where hurting you becomes necessary.
And yet...
Henry stood up from his chair and straightened his unremarkable gray suit. The Galactic Council has declared war on humanity. That is your right. But before you commit your forces, I strongly suggest you consider what happens when you make war into a problem that humanity decides to solve. He picked up his briefcase and walked toward the door. I will be in my quarters. If you wish to discuss alternatives, in the meantime, I believe the baking competition results should be announced soon. I am genuinely curious about whether the Andromeda pie will place in the top 3.
And with that,
Henry Bishop left the room. Behind him, 12 of the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat in stunned silence, wondering for the first time if they had made a terrible mistake. 1 week after the emergency session, the Galactic Council received news that changed everything. The Crixal's 7th Fleet had gone silent for 100 hive ships carrying 18 million bio-warriors had been conducting standard maneuvers in the periphery, a region of space far from any inhabited worlds. They were preparing for the invasion of human territory. They were the pride of the swarm, the most feared military force in 3 quadrants, and now they were not responding to any communications. High Arbiter Zetharan received the report in the middle of the night cycle. He read it 3 times before he believed what he was seeing. Then he immediately called an emergency session of the senior delegates. The chamber was tense when everyone arrived. Ambassador Crixveth was trembling with barely contained rage and fear. The Methodary delegate had compressed itself into a tight, anxious ball. Even the normally stoic Torvani representative was shifting uncomfortably in his seat. Henry Bishop arrived last, carrying a cup of coffee and looking like he had just woken up from a pleasant nap. Beside him walked a young woman who had not been present at any previous meetings. She had short dark hair, and there were faint grease stains on her fingers that she had not quite managed to wash away. She wore simple work clothes instead of formal diplomatic attire. I apologize for the delay, Henry said as he took his seat. I was watching the conclusion of the baking competition. The Andromeda pie came in third place. I thought it deserved better, but the judges felt the crust was slightly overdone. This is not the time for your games, Zetharon snapped. His scales were cycling through colors so rapidly that he looked like a broken display screen. The Krixal 7th Fleet has gone dark. 400 ships have stopped responding. We demand to know what has happened. Henry took a sip of his coffee. That does sound concerning. Have you tried turning them off and on again? Crixveth slammed 4 of its legs against the table. 18 million of my people were on those ships. 18 million warriors bred for combat, trained from birth to serve the swarm. They are not responding because they are dead. All of them. Dead. The young woman beside Henry raised her hand slightly. Actually, the ships themselves are fine. You can probably salvage most of them once you clean out the organic residue. I tried to make the process as neat as possible, but there is always some mess with biological targets. Every eye in the room turned to look at her. Who is this person? Zetharon demanded. Henry gestured casually with his coffee cup. This is Katie Morrison. Her official title is Technical Consultant, but that does not really capture what she does. Katie is what we call an engineer. She likes to build things and solve problems. She is responsible for the destruction of our fleet. Crixveth's voice was barely a whisper. Katie shrugged. I designed the system that did it. A colleague of mine built the delivery probe. Someone else handled the navigation calculations. It was a team effort, really. How? The Methodari delegate's voice was hollow with shock. Our sensors detected a single small vessel emerging from fold space, 30 light minutes from the fleet's position. It transmitted a brief message and then departed. That is all. How could a single probe destroy 400 warships? Katie pulled a small tablet from her pocket and tapped the screen a few times. Would you like me to explain? I can walk you through the technical details if you are interested. I find that most people do not appreciate the elegance of the solution unless they understand how it works, explained Zetharon said. His voice was flat and cold. Okay, so the basic principle is actually pretty simple. Every biological organism has a specific molecular structure. The Crixali biowarriors are carbon-based life forms with a particular cellular composition. Once you understand that composition, you can design a compound that disrupts their cellular integrity at the molecular level. She said this as casually as if she were describing a recipe for soup. The tricky part was delivery, Katie continued. The hive ships have excellent shielding against energy weapons and physical projectiles, but they have to cycle their atmosphere to keep the biowarriors alive. That creates a vulnerability. The probe released a cloud of nanoscale particles into the region of space around the fleet. The particles were designed to be drawn into the atmospheric cycling systems. Once inside, they activated and released the disruptive compound. You poisoned them, Crixveth said. That is a crude way to describe it, but essentially yes. The compound caused immediate and irreversible cellular collapse in any Crixal biological tissue it contacted. The process took approximately 4 seconds per organism. Given the number of biowarriors on each ship, the entire fleet was neutralized in under 2 minutes. The chamber was absolutely silent. The probe also transmitted full technical specifications for the compound and the delivery system, Katie added. We thought you might find it useful for pest control or something. We killed 18 million sentient beings, the Methodari delegate said slowly. And you sent us instructions on how to do it ourselves. The instructions were more of a professional courtesy. We wanted you to understand that this was not some mysterious super weapon. It was just chemistry and engineering. Anyone with sufficient knowledge could have developed something similar. How long did it take you to create this weapon? Zetharon asked. His voice was barely audible. Katie thought about it for a moment. The compound itself took about 3 days. The delivery system took another 2 weeks, but most of that was miniaturization work. The hardest part was getting everything small enough to fit on a probe that could be launched without being detected. 3 days, Crixveth repeated. You developed a weapon capable of destroying our greatest fleet in 3 days. The actual weapon, yes. Like I said, the delivery system took longer. I am a bit of a perfectionist when it comes to engineering problems. Henry set down his coffee cup and leaned forward. I think this is a good moment to revisit our earlier conversation about humanity's capabilities. Katie is not a military scientist. She does not work for any defense organization. Her normal job involves developing better water filtration systems for colony worlds. Water filtration, Zetheron said numbly. She has a hobby interest in molecular chemistry and a general enthusiasm for solving interesting problems. When the Council declared war, I asked her if she could come up with something to demonstrate our capabilities. She said yes, and asked for 3 weeks. She finished early, Katie nodded. I had some free time. And honestly, the Crixall biology was not that complicated once I got a good sample to study. No offense, Crixfith did not respond. The ambassador seemed to have lost the ability to speak. The point of this demonstration, Henry continued, was not to kill your warriors. We take no pleasure in death. The point was to show you what happens when humanity decides to solve a problem. He stood up and walked slowly around the table, his hands clasped behind his back. You have spent thousands of years building your military forces. You have bred warriors and constructed fleets and developed strategies. All of that work, all of that investment, was rendered worthless in 3 days by one young woman. With a chemistry set and too much free time, he stopped in front of Zetheron and looked directly into the High Arbiter's 4 eyes. This is what I was trying to warn you about. Humanity does not fight wars the way you do. We do not line up our forces and clash in honorable battle. We look at the problem, we find the most efficient solution, and we implement it. If that solution happens to make your entire military obsolete overnight, that is simply how the problem gets solved. What do you want from us? Zetheron asked quietly. The same thing I wanted from the beginning. Peace. We have no interest in conquering your worlds or destroying your civilizations. We just want to be left alone to pursue our own interests. But if you continue down this path, we will continue solving problems. And I promise you, you will not like our solutions. Katie raised her hand again. I have already started working on countermeasures for the Methadarian Torvani military capabilities. I should have preliminary designs ready by next week, but I would really rather get back to my water filtration project. It is much more interesting than weapons work. Henry smiled his unsettling smile. The choice is yours, High Arbiter. War or peace? Destruction or cooperation? We are happy with either outcome, but I strongly suggest you choose wisely. The private meeting chamber was a small room designed for quiet conversations rather than grand speeches. There were no guards, no weapons, no recording devices. Just 5 chairs arranged around a simple wooden table that looked out of place among all the crystal and metal of station. Nexus Prime High Arbiter Zetheron had requested this meeting personally. He had asked for no witnesses and no formal protocols. He simply wanted to understand. Sitting across from him were Henry Bishop and Katie Morrison. The human envoy looked as calm and unremarkable as ever. The young engineer was fidgeting with a small device she had pulled from her pocket, taking it apart and putting it back together without really thinking about it. I have served the Galactic Council for 200 years, Zetheron began quietly. I have negotiated treaties with species that communicate through chemical signals. I have mediated disputes between civilizations that have been at war for longer than humanity has existed. I thought I understood how the galaxy works. Paused and looked at Henry with something that might have been exhaustion. I do not understand humanity. I do not understand how you think or why you act the way you do. And that terrifies me more than any weapon you could create. Henry nodded slowly. That is a fair reaction. We are rather strange by galactic standards. Explain it to me. Not as a diplomat delivering threats, but as one thinking being to another. Help me understand what humanity is. Henry was quiet for a long moment. He seemed to be considering how to answer such a large question. Let me start with a story, he said finally. About 400 years ago, before humanity had developed faster-than-light travel, we sent a probe to explore the outer edges of our solar system. The probe was called Voyager. It was a simple machine with primitive instruments and a tiny amount of computing power. By the time it reached the edge of our system, It had been traveling for over 40 years. That seems inefficient, Zetheran said. It was incredibly inefficient. But we sent it anyway, because we wanted to know what was out there. We could not wait for better technology. We could not wait for certainty. We just pointed this little machine at the darkness and said, go. Katie looked up from her device. That is kind of the whole human thing right there. We cannot stand not knowing something. It makes us uncomfortable in a way that is hard to describe. All species are curious, Zetheran said. Curiosity is a survival trait. Yes, but most species satisfy their curiosity and then stop. They learn what they need to know, and then they focus on maintaining what they have built. Humans do not work that way. We learn something new and immediately want to know more. Every answer creates 10 new questions. It never ends. Henry leaned back in his chair. The Galactic Council has been spacefaring for approximately 40,000 years. In that time, you have made steady improvements to your technology. Better engines, stronger shields, more efficient power systems. Each generation builds slightly on what came before. It is a sensible approach that minimizes risk and ensures stability. That is the path of wisdom, Zetheran agreed. Perhaps. But humanity has been spacefaring for only 400 years. In that time, we have completely reinvented our technology 3 times. Not improved it. Reinvented it. Thrown out everything we knew and started over with entirely new principles. Why would you do that? Because someone had a crazy idea that turned out to work better than the old way. And once we knew the better way existed, we could not keep using the old way. It would have felt wrong. Katie nodded enthusiastically. That is exactly it. I was working on water filtration systems because the current designs are good but not great. They work fine for most purposes, but I kept thinking about how they could be better. It was like an itch I could not scratch. I had to keep working on the problem, even though nobody asked me to, and when the Council declared war, Zetheran asked. Same thing. It became a problem that needed solving. I did not want to hurt anyone. I just wanted to find the most elegant solution to the situation. The biodispersal system was actually quite beautiful from an engineering perspective. The way the nanoscale particles interact with atmospheric cycling systems is really clever if you understand the underlying principles. Zetheran stared at her. You destroyed 18 million lives, and you describe it as beautiful. Katie's expression became serious for the first time. I am not a monster, High Arbiter. I understand that those were living beings with thoughts and feelings. I did not enjoy what I did. But when I sit down to solve a problem, I focus on the problem. The ethics come later. That is how humans work. We solve the problem first, and then we deal with the consequences. That is terrifying, as Henry agreed quietly. It is. We know that about ourselves. We have spent centuries trying to build systems that force us to consider consequences before we act. Laws and ethics, and review boards and international agreements. Sometimes they work. Sometimes they do not. He met Zetheran's eyes directly. Humanity is dangerous. High Arbiter. Not because we are cruel or evil, but because we are driven by something we cannot fully control. We see problems and we solve them. We see questions and we answer them. We see limits and we push past them. It is in our nature in a way that we cannot change. Then how can we possibly coexist with you? How can any species feel safe knowing that humanity might wake up one day and decide to solve the problem of other civilizations existing? Because we have learned something important over our history. We have learned that the most interesting problems are not about destruction. They are about creation. Building things is more satisfying than breaking things. Understanding the universe is more rewarding than conquering it. Henry gestured at Katie. She did not enjoy designing that weapon. She told me afterward that it felt like a waste of her talents. She would much rather spend her time figuring out how to provide clean water to billions of people. That problem is harder and more interesting than killing bio-warriors. Katie nodded. War is boring. The solutions are always the same. Find a weakness, exploit it, win. There is no creativity required. But designing a water filtration system that can work on any planet with any water composition, that is a real challenge. That is the kind of problem I want to spend my life solving. Zetherin was quiet for a long time. His scales had shifted to a thoughtful blue-green color that indicated deep contemplation. You are saying that humanity chooses not to destroy because destruction is not interesting enough, more or less. We spent thousands of years fighting each other before we reached the stars. We got very good at it. And then we got bored with it. There are only so many ways to kill people, but there are infinite ways to build things and discover things and create things. We would rather do that. But if threatened, you will turn your attention back to destruction. If we have no other choice, yes. And we will be very, very good at it. Because that is what we do. We solve problems. Whatever the problem is. Henry reached across the table and placed his hand near Zetherin's arm. Not touching, but close. A gesture of connection. We do not want to be your enemies, High Arbiter. We want to be your neighbors. We want to learn about your history and your culture and your science. We want to share what we have discovered and see what we can build together. The galaxy is vast and full of mysteries. There is enough out there to keep humanity curious for millions of years. He smiled, and this time it was not unsettling. It was warm and genuine. All we ask is that you let us be curious in peace. Let us explore and discover and create. And in exchange, we will share everything we learn. We will help you solve problems you have struggled with for millennia. We will be the best neighbors you have ever had. And if we refuse, Henry's smile faded slightly, then we will solve that problem too. But I really hope it does not come to that. War is so terribly boring. 1 month had passed since the declaration of war, and the Grand Chamber looked very different now. The same delegates filled the same seats, but the anger and fear had been replaced by something else. There was uncertainty, yes. There was caution. But there was also a strange new feeling that none of them could quite name. It felt almost like hope. High Arbiter Zetheron stood at the central podium, his scales a calm and steady blue. He had aged visibly in the past month. The stress of recent events had left marks on him that would take years to fade, but his voice was strong and clear as he addressed the assembly. The Galactic Council has spent the past 30 days in careful deliberation. We have studied the information provided by humanity. We have verified their claims. We have examined their capabilities. And we have reached a conclusion that I believe will reshape our civilization for generations to come. The chamber was silent. Every delegate leaned forward to hear what would come next. We were not wrong to fear humanity, Zetheron continued. Their capabilities exceed anything we had imagined. A single human engineer, working alone with basic tools, developed a weapon that destroyed our most powerful fleet in minutes. Their collective innovation proceeds at a pace that our scientists cannot explain or predict. By any rational measure, they should be considered an existential threat to all other civilizations. Henry Bishop sat in his usual seat, wearing his usual gray suit, displaying his usual mild expression. Katie Morrison sat beside him, still fidgeting with some small device she had built during the meeting. Neither of them seemed concerned by the words being spoken. However, Zetherin said, and his voice softened, "We have also come to understand something else. Something that changes everything we thought we knew about this species." He turned to look directly at the human delegation. Humanity does not want to destroy us. They do not want to conquer us. They do not even want to compete with us. They want to be left alone to pursue their strange obsessions in peace. And when they are not left alone, they want to resolve the situation as quickly as possible so they can get back to whatever they were doing before. A few delegates made sounds of confusion. This was not the conclusion they had expected. In the past month, humanity has shared more technological advances with the Council than we have developed in the past 5,000 years. Their medical innovations could extend the average lifespan of every species in the galaxy. Their agricultural techniques could end food shortages on hundreds of worlds. Their energy systems could power our civilization for millennia without depleting any resources. Zetheron held up a small data crystal. Crystal contains designs for a new type of faster-than-light engine. Humanity calls it a skip drive. It is approximately 600 times more efficient than our current full-drive technology. They developed it 40 years ago and never bothered to tell anyone because they were too busy working on the next version. The chamber erupted in murmurs of disbelief. All of this was given to us freely. Zetheron continued over the noise. No treaties were demanded. No territory was requested. No tribute was required. The human envoy simply handed us the information and said he thought we might find it useful. He set down the crystal and looked out at the assembled delegates, asked the human envoy why his species would help us after we threatened to destroy them. Do you know what he said? The chamber waited, said it was easy for them and we needed help. That was all. It was easy and we needed help. As if those two facts alone were sufficient reason to share the greatest technological treasures in the galaxy. Zetheron stepped down from the podium and walked slowly toward the human delegation. Every eye in the chamber followed him. I have lived for 300 years, he said quietly. I have met thousands of species and billions of individuals. I have seen kindness and cruelty, wisdom and foolishness, courage and cowardice. But I have never encountered anything quite like humanity. He stopped in front of Henry Bishop. You terrify me, human. Your species terrifies me. Not because of your weapons or your technology, but because I cannot predict what you will do next. Your minds work in ways that I cannot understand. Your motivations seem almost random to outside observers. Henry nodded calmly. That is a fair assessment. And yet, Zetheron continued, I find myself wanting to trust you. I find myself believing that you mean what you say. You genuinely want peace. You genuinely want to share your discoveries. You genuinely find war boring and would rather spend your time building things and solving puzzles. We do. We really do. Zetheron turned back to face the chamber. The Galactic Council formally rescinds its declaration of war against the Terran Confederacy. Furthermore, we extend an invitation to humanity to join the Council as full members, with all associated rights and responsibilities. The chamber erupted in noise. Some delegates protested loudly. Others cheered. A few simply sat in stunned silence. Zetheron raised his forearms for quiet. I know this decision is controversial. I know many of you still fear what humanity could do if they turned against us. But consider the alternative. Consider what happens if we continue down the path of war. He pointed at Katie Morrison. That young woman destroyed 18 million warriors in 3 days. She told me it was not even a particularly interesting problem. She told me she has already designed countermeasures against every military force in the coalition. She told me she would rather be working on water filtration systems. Katie looked up from her device and waved awkwardly. If we fight humanity, we will lose. Not because they are evil or cruel, but because they will solve the problem of our resistance the same way they solve every other problem. Quickly, efficiently, and with minimal wasted effort. And then they will go back to their telescopes and their laboratories and their baking competitions. And we will be nothing but a footnote in their history. Zetheron walked back to the podium. But if we welcome them as neighbors and partners, everything changes. Their curiosity becomes our advantage. Their innovations become our innovations. Their boundless energy becomes a resource we can share rather than a threat we must fear. He looked at Henry Bishop one more time. The human envoy told me that his species wants to explore the universe and answer questions that no one has ever asked before. He said there are enough mysteries in the galaxy to keep humanity curious for millions of years. I believe him, and I would rather be exploring those mysteries alongside humanity than trying to fight against them. Henry stood up from his chair. The chamber fell silent as he walked slowly toward the podium. Zetheron stepped aside to let him speak. High Arbiter, members of the Galactic Council, I accept your invitation on behalf of the Terran Confederacy. We are honored to join this assembly, and we look forward to a long and productive relationship with all of your species. He paused and smiled his warm, genuine smile. We have so much to learn from you. You have preserved knowledge and culture for tens of thousands of years. You have maintained peace across vast stretches of space. You have built civilizations that have endured longer than humanity has existed. Those are achievements we admire greatly." Henry reached into his briefcase. A few delegates tensed nervously, but he only pulled out his newspaper. "In exchange, we will share everything we discover. We will help you solve problems that have troubled you for millennia. We will be the best neighbors the galaxy has ever known." He held up the newspaper. "And for anyone who is interested, I am happy to report that the baker who made the Andromeda pie has announced. She will be entering next year's competition with an even more ambitious design. She is planning to recreate the entire local group in pastry form." For a moment, the chamber was silent. Then High Arbiter Zetherin began to laugh. It was a strange sound, like stones grinding together, but it was unmistakably laughter. Other delegates joined in, each species expressing amusement in their own way. Clicking mandibles and shifting colors and rumbling, vocalizations filled the chamber, and in the middle of it all stood a tired diplomat in a gray suit, holding a newspaper and smiling at the absurdity of the universe. This was how humanity joined the Galactic Council, not through conquest or intimidation, but through the simple act of being too strange and too helpful and too curious to be treated as enemies. The galaxy would never be the same. And somewhere, in a small kitchen on Earth, a baker was already planning her next masterpiece.